Hello everyone, I'm back home where the lighting is horrible, the background is uninteresting, and I have to talk in a quiet voice in order to not wake up the family members. No bookshelf background today, but I do have a book review for you, 1984 by George Orwell. I don't actually have a copy of the book because I had to return it to the library, but I'll probably just flash a picture of it up here or something. 1984, in a lot of ways, represents the epitome of a dystopian society. Partially because it's the one that people have most often heard of. I mean, more than likely, if you ask somebody to name a dystopian novel, they're going to either name 1984 or Fahrenheit 451. You see a lot of the things that really factor into a dystopian society. You see a controlling government, you see a placated people, you see history being altered right before your very eyes. The government, which is known as the party, controls everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. They are out to control actions, information, even your very thoughts. More than anything, 1984 is kind of an exploration into the human mind and how easily the human mind can be manipulated. The protagonist is Winston Smith, a fairly unassuming middle-aged man. He works in the Ministry of Truth, and the Ministry of Truth deals with the business of altering history. So the Ministry of Truth is in the business of lies. You find a lot of contradictions like that in 1984. Ostensibly, Winston's job is to make corrections in historical records. If, say, Big Brother, who is the almost godlike leader of the party, if he makes a speech saying one thing and then something completely different happens, then Winston has to alter the records of the speech so that it reflects what actually happened. In other words, he has to change history to suit the party, to always put the party in a good light. Now, Winston is, on the outward appearance, a devoted member of the party. He does everything the party tells him, he does his job, and he does it very, very well. But Winston is in trouble because he is committing one of the most heinous crimes that you can commit in this society. Thought crime. He is thinking rebellious thoughts. Now, this novel is divided into three parts. The first part looks at the society on its surface, all the little rituals they go through, all the rules they have to adhere to, basically the day-to-day life in this society. Part 2 gets into how the society actually works. We're given a very, very detailed analysis about a lot of the things that go on in the party. And this is the part where we learn a little bit more about newspeak and a little bit more about doublethink. Newspeak is a language that is essentially trying to condense English into its most basic forms. So basically attempting to continue to do its part to eliminate any kind of individual thought within the society. And then there's doublethink. Doublethink is probably one of the most fascinating aspects of this novel. Doublethink basically means exactly what it sounds like. It's the ability to hold two contradictory ideas within your head, but accept them both. And doublethink is absolutely necessary to have in order to live in this society. Let's say, for example, that you're working for the Ministry of Truth and you're having to alter all of these historical facts. You have to be aware that you are writing lies in order to do your job effectively. But at the same time, you have to simultaneously accept those lies as absolute truth. So you learn how the society functions, and there is a lot of fascinating stuff in this part of the novel. But then you get to part 3. Throughout the novel, Winston says, "I know the how, but I don't know the why." Now, with a lot of dystopian literature, the motive is one of two things. It's either for the people's protection or for the people's happiness. And so this is where 1984 starts to stray from the path of normal dystopian literature. In the third part of the novel, Winston is being tortured, and an inner party member actually asks him that question, why? Winston answers with, well, you probably think it's for our protection. Because we can't think for ourselves, you have to think for us, and so that's why you take all these measures. And the inner party member says, no, that's not the reason. The reason why we go to all these measures is because we want control. Plain and simple, he just flat out says it. We want control. This is something that is usually said in an angry rant by the protagonist, but it's actually being admitted by an inner party member. They only want control for control's sake. And this right here is George Orwell's cynicism. George Orwell had an extremely cynical attitude about, in particular, Russian communism. And he believed that the leaders of the Soviet Union wanted control for control's own sake, and so he did not make that point at all subtle in this novel. So this book is absolutely fascinating. The futuristic world that George Orwell creates is incredibly rich and incredibly detailed. And plus, just looking at newspeak and doublethink and the effect that they have, it's just amazing that all of this stuff came out of one man's mind. In short, this is just a terrific piece of of literature, and I do think that everyone should read it, but it's not a favorite anymore. And I'll tell you why. Like I said before, George Orwell's attitude towards what he is writing is incredibly cynical. The cynicism is apparent in Part 3, where he has an inner party member admitting that they only want control for control's sake, but it's also apparent when you look at the arc of the protagonist. In most dystopian novels, you have the protagonist starting out his story as a part of the society. He might be a little bit more enlightened than most, but he's a part of the society, he's integrated into it, and he's never thought to question it in any way. But then something happens, usually because he meets somebody, and he begins to question certain aspects of the society. Or she, I don't know why I'm saying he, there are a lot of female protagonists in these stories too. And slowly the protagonist starts to realize that this society is wrong and either fights against it or runs away from it. Winston's story arc goes in the other direction. He begins rebelling against the society, rebelling against Big Brother and the party. Maybe not through his actions, but definitely through his thoughts, which, again, the most heinous crime that you can commit. And he spends a lot of parts 1 and 2 doing what he can to rebel against them. And while he does learn more and more and more about the inner workings of the society, by the end of the novel, he has become completely integrated into it. Not only does he accept everything that the party stands for, but he actually loves everything that the party stands for. George Orwell leaves no avenue open for hope at the end of this novel. None at all. The only hope in this story is the fact that the story itself exists. So this is going off the favorites list for purely personal reasons, and I realize that, but I like my dystopian novels to have a little bit of hope at the end. I think they're a little bit more meaningful that way. So I think that 1984 is a fascinating book, I think it's a good book, and I recognize its merit as a fine piece of literature, but I can't call it a favorite anymore. So there's my review of 1984. While you're at it, you can mosey on over to my other channel, Vlog Driver, and look at my review of another George Orwell novel, Animal Farm. And the next favorite books review on this channel will be Feed by M.T. Anderson. And I'll probably be back in my regular environment for that one, so I'll see you then.